Hello, good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, and wherever you are in this fine, wonderful world. We're live to the world, so I'm really looking forward to going live today. I've been looking forward to it for the last few days because I have a wonderful guest today. Like he's had a phenomenal career, coming from adversity and coming from a really wonderful place. So I'm dying to get him on today on my show because I want for him to reveal his successes, but also how he worked from the place of adversity to being in success, to burnout, and actually to come back round again. So I'm always fascinated by how people do stuff and what motivates them to do stuff, because we're all growing, we all change, but if we can get a helping hand from someone, that's always phenomenal. So Chris is in the background. I'll bring him up in a few moments, and I think all the audience that are here today is going to absolutely love this. So it's going to be phenomenal. So without further ado, let me get my technology working okay. If my technology works okay. And it's not working, but that's fine. I should just bring him in anyway. So, Chris, welcome.
Thank you, Jason. Delighted to be here.
And yeah, absolutely delighted to have you on board today. So, look, I really, really appreciate that. And I've actually found the right button to actually just do this quick intro before we go live.
Good.
One of the most I know it's gone a little bit further on than that now. If I'm your boss, then layer on that's very clear.
CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, Nobel laureates, so really has expanded.
What really makes a resilient person? Because I coach people and all that.
And welcome back. We have been live. Sometimes people disappear with a cup of coffee in his hand. So, Chris,
there we are.
You're very welcome to my show today. So, a little bit of background about Chris before he actually gives you a little bit more detail. So, Chris comes from Northern Ireland and he's lived the life of fight or flight, and he's also choosing to fight. He has that certain edge in his mind that he wants to just pursue his dreams. And like he's got a book, and we'll discuss that in a few moments. But coming from high emotional intelligence and a high IQ, with working in a pub as a young age as a 13-year-old, and interacting with clients and interacting with the people that he knows, and like selling to them, but also creating that emotional connection with people, which really helps you and sets people apart, especially when you work in a pub or you have that people connection and you understand people in a sort of a more emotional way. So, and you've worked in the dizzy heights of Merrill Lynch, and you made a phenomenal amount of money, but then something happened and something changed. So, Chris, you're very welcome. So thank you. And sort of describe to me some pivot points along the way.
Yes, thank you, Jason. Absolutely delighted to be here. I should say that this has been my my medical trip. Writing this book and understanding some of the things that actually made me the person I am today has all really been part of the last 12 months. I started writing last March, and here we are. A bit over like 12, 14 months later, and I'm learning more and more about myself all the time, so really pleased to be here to chat about it today.
So, Chris, like we have discussed it before we started on a few occasions, what were those sort of pivot points from sort of coming from the place that you were with the troubles in Northern Ireland and all of that? What made you change? What was going through your mind at those particular times to make you go, well, enough is enough, I need to do something?
Well, interestingly, I don't think I did change. I've had a lot of trauma in my life, unfortunately. So I lost my father when I was 3, my mother when I was 12. my brother, who was a very, very smart guy and should have been a professor or something. A few months after our mother died, they dumped him out of grammar school for reasons best known to themselves. And I left too. So I was 12 years old, in year one in grammar school. And so, things were tough, very, very tough. For a number of years, we bummed around on the streets of Northern Ireland. He went to alcohol and I went to gambling. And so we had a long number of years of doing virtually nothing, and wasting our intellectual brain. But I think, I have children of that age myself today. I have a 13-year-old, and I've learned a lot from observing how he has got through life and think how the heck we did it. It was difficult. So I went back to school at 18, and Paul, my brother, went into an alcoholic treatment center at 18, and being 18 months older than me. So the period you reflect on there is, in sort of 13, 14, working in the pub, we were obliged to generate some commissions and some income. And so whoever was following me on, invariably my brother, at 6 p.m. So I'd come home from school, work in the pub from 4 to 6. He'd be asking, so did you take any money? Are the customers still here? Why is the bar empty? So from that age, I was aware of how to really retain a customer. And with the EQ, as you describe it, working hard in conversation, making them feel like I'm an adult. I was very aware that I was at school very often with some of the children of these guys sitting at the bar. But I had to talk to them about movies and horses and things that mattered in the adult world. Because the last thing I wanted was someone coming on and saying, "Oh, the bar's empty. What have you been doing?" So that's a quick answer to that question.
So you've come through a bit of a roller coaster ride, really, because you described in your book about you at the top of your game within Merrill Lynch, and you described the route that you got there and getting yourself through university. You won the scholarship to get into Queen's University, and you obviously did well. You got a high intelligence level there. I know I'm giving you a lot of praise here, but it's what were the moments in your mind just to say, look, I need to succeed? What goes through your head? Because I really want to understand that, but I also want to understand it so other people can actually use a sort of a strategy to build success. So what is that?
I think it's something that most people have, actually, but it's just about really desiring it, number one, and secondly, having an ambition to achieve it. So whilst I didn't really have a plan, I went back to school at 18. I had no expectation of getting to Queen's University and then into Deloitte and then into Ulster Investment Bank and ultimately Merrill Lynch. None of that was a plan, but the plan, the thing that stayed with me from the beginning, after we lost our father, our mother had been very much telling me and my brother and other family members, like, you're special, you're very intelligent. And we were playing that out in our daily lives by, achieving top of the class grades, and everything was exactly as expected to be. So while I went through a very bad period between, say, 13 years old, 12 when our mother died, 12 and 18 when I went back to school, I always carried with me the expectation that actually I was very smart and I would achieve once I got the opportunity. And in life, I then had a huge amount of opportunities that were not planned, but I took every opportunity that came my way.
Yeah, of course. That's good to actually just take those opportunities. So what do you think people are facing right now when it comes to adversity, and how could you use a similar strategy to yourself to move forward? Because it's all about moving forward.
I think the critical thing at the moment is people being on their own, and it's very important to talk, and one of the things that I talked about at a recent seminar last week, all the mistakes I made in life is when I did not seek advice. So, and that's talking, right? So people who are feeling that they want some motivation or want to get away from a place that they're in at the moment, then the answer is go and chat to your brother, your sister, go and talk to your parents, go and talk to your kids if you're of a certain age. All of those things will make a difference, and you've got to try and reach your brain back to where you were before, all this crisis set in. So for me, for example, I do a lot of audiobooks, and this is something I've done sort of second time round. So when I first, inverted commas, retired from the city, aged 39 in 2002, I was doing audiobooks, but they were really educational. I was doing, stuff like Thomas Hardy and Charles Dickens, things that I'd never done at school, and trying to educate myself. But now the audiobooks I'm reading largely are biographies, as it happens, but sometimes more recently I've been going into fiction. Right now I'm just doing Matt Haig's Midnight Library and sort of the Book of Regrets, which is a very interesting little theme. And so all of this stuff is about bringing your brain out. So I think that today my brain is more active than it's been in probably 5 to 10 years. And that's been because of the lockdown. So I've taken something positive out of that. And I think people could and should do the same.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good thing. I know we're all coming out of this mad period now, which is good. And it's also giving people a little bit more positive strength. When you were going through working with Merrill Lynch, and your book is titled The $1 Million Irishman, but you were at the peak of your game. What sort of went at those? Because you obviously went through a burnout period. And I think we've all gone through those in one shape or another. What was the moment of clarity that made you just see life in a different way? What was going through the mind at that particular time?
I think firstly, it's a bit like probably being a pro footballer or something like that. I always use the analogy with football because we were the star strikers in the team, getting paid huge sums of money. And I was like right at the top, the #1 sales generator in London, therefore Europe. But I had Ireland to cover all to myself, and I had 5 accounts paying me more than $2 million. Most people had one if they were lucky. So I, at the time I used to say it's like I'm happy being busy because I never get time to think about anything. I just keep going, and it's like a sort of dynamo, a momentum. And also, I servicing all these accounts who were in effect competitors with each other was quite a challenge because people weren't that comfortable with me talking to their competitor. And my answer was, look, whenever it's relevant to you, you get the first call, and that's it. And that applies to all people. So I was at the top of my game, but markets started to tumble from 2000 and March 2000 when the dot-com bubble burst. So I left in May 2002, and for that couple of years, it was at the added pressure of, the daily grind and going in to deal with bad things every day.
Yeah, of course.
Selling again today, we were cutting a loss. It was as opposed to the roll upwards, which was a result. We made $1 million yesterday. Now we're losing $1 million, and we're losing many millions, and the client's not happy. So I think that I never really sort of had the moment where I thought I was not performing. I was still performing, and my revenues were at record levels when I left. But I felt that, how much of this can I take on a daily basis? And that was really what caused me to stop.
Yeah, because it's high impact, high burnout, and especially when you're at the top of your game, it probably can weigh you down over a period of time. Like I've been in sales and marketing for many years, and now I train and coach people to work things slightly different. And I think it's all about mindset initially, and you work out what your purpose is and how you can believe in your purpose and what money can do for you, as opposed to having the money and cashing your bank account and all that. That's wonderful, but what does that mean for you? What can you do with that? How does that work for you? And all the purpose levels. So what was your purpose at those particular times, and what sort of changed your purpose?
I had 11 years of growing revenues from 1991 to 2002. And literally these revenues went up on a monthly basis. So, every month and every year was higher than the one before, and so on as markets went up. And even when the markets were going down, I was increasing revenues because I was dealing with the crash, and I was selling things at a faster rate than everybody else, dare I say, and making people, that's one of my high EQ talents. I used this term recently that I could make people do things they wouldn't otherwise do. So I had to believe in it myself, and then I had to make them do it. So this is the process. So basically, I think, again, the football analogy, I really felt that I was right about most things, and I wouldn't talk about it unless I believed it. So I didn't, I just went through life going at higher and higher levels. I suppose it's a bit like being a striker in a football team. You're never really measuring yourself saying, how good am I today? You're simply measuring yourself based on the goals you score. And so therefore my measure was always going higher. And you know, of course, that makes it more difficult. So when I left in May 2002, well, I've just said that my revenues were at record levels. That was for 2001. I was now facing in 2002 my first ever down year, which, you know, was having an impact on my thinking as well.
So what was the impact on thinking? What actually made you sort of go bang? Because this is quite interesting for other people that are either going through the same thing now, because a lot of change has happened, like immediate change. Never been a time in this world where there's been such a massive global shift in people's mindsets. But how did you, because I'm always interested about what mindset did you have to change from burnout to repivoting and rechanging your life to another direction?
You know, I'm not even sure I was aware that I had burned out. There's a factor. So my thinking was really, you know, I'm having my first down year, and I was using this term in my head at the time, you know, my George Best moment, you know, go out at the top, you know, and basically that's how I was thinking. Having written the book and having reflected back, then I absolutely, definitely had burned out, but I didn't necessarily identify it at the time, you know. But 3 years of writing the beginnings of this story, you know, 6 months on, 6 months off, 6 months on, 6 months off, and then another 6 months on. So 3 years later, I meet Christopher Little, who's J.K. Rowling's literary agent in a restaurant, and he's a bit the worse for wear. And he says, when he heard a bit about my story, he said, "Oh no, not another everything Irish sob story." So maybe that was the first time that I realized that, you know, I'd spent 3 years doing that. It was time to go back to work, you know. And at that point, you know, I thought, well, actually, this story's going nowhere. What am I doing? And I better think about providing for my family. So I went back into the game at that point, but without any shadow of a doubt, you know, I had a burnout, but I didn't necessarily realize it.
And how did you pivot? What did you do to repivot? Because I know people now are pivoting from their careers and maybe changing what they did, but pushing ego aside, what happened to do that? Because I know a lot of this is explained in your book, but let's have a look at what happened.
Well, I think the book helped me to do it. You see, everything's about engaging your brain, and you know, until you engage your brain is drifting lower. I mean, unless it's like a muscle, it is a muscle. Yeah. You have to use it. And so I think in writing the book, I started to think about some of the things I'd done in my life and the mistakes I'd made, not least. And I thought, well, you know what, I should have done things differently, and I have a lot of regrets in that respect. You know, the book of regrets. But you know, I think in writing the book, it gave me a new perspective. And you know, I've started having this sort of chat. You know, my first chat, I've been on Irish television, I've been on Ulster television in Northern Ireland, I've been on national radio, and every time I'm sort of learning more and more about my own story myself. And so what pivoted was, I think, writing the book forced me to think about things that I'd largely forgotten about. And then secondly, today, you know, talking about them and really understanding, you know, that in fact, things that I didn't understand were real. And now I feel just in quite a positive place, really.
That's awesome. I always like to think, Chris, is if you were to give golden nuggets or feed forward some sort of 3 pivot points or 3 moments that went bang, just so the audience can actually go, well, maybe I can apply that to myself, or from the wisdom of your story.
3, well, they would all apply to people that helped me. I would say that getting into university was a huge leap, going back to school and then getting into university, number 1. Getting the opportunity to come to London with a chap called Paul Roy, who offered me the job after I approached him. So I approached him and said, I know why, as it was in those days, Smith Newcourt and then ultimately Merrill Lynch. I know why Smith Newcourt are not doing business in Ireland. He said, why? I said, you need an Irishman. He said, who? And I said, me. And that's a true story. So So I then caveated that by saying I had a court case coming up about my road accident, and if I won, I wouldn't come to London. If I lost, I would. So anyway, I came to London. The third thing, I suppose, the third pivot point in life, I think meeting your wife and having a proper family and having kids. That's the third thing in my life that I've been very lucky about. So my son is 18 today. My eldest child was 20 2 weeks ago, and I've got another one who will be 16 next week. So it's all happening here, but family are without doubt the most important thing of all.
Of course, yeah, no, I completely concur with that. So, Chris, if you were interviewing you, what question would you ask yourself?
I love it. I suppose I'd say, did you always believe in yourself? And the answer is yes. So haven't been fatherless since I've been 3 years old. I never knew my father, but my brother did, as it happens, and I think it's one of the big factors between us. He's probably a smarter guy than me. He's not around anymore, but was, and so I think that our mother trained us to say, you're a very special person. You're going to be something. I always expected to be a doctor or a priest, dare I say, some of these things, and so I always believed in myself. So the question is, do you always believe in yourself? And as I traveled through life, through university, I mean, going from OMA Tech, having gone back to school to do a crash course in GCSEs, where I'm doing things like building construction, to doing advanced econometrics of Queens. Come on, this is all within a couple of years. That was one huge intellectual leap, but not harder, just more focus. And then moving into the stock market, in the beginning at Ulster Investment Bank, having been a period at Deloitte, and then into the city, at the high end of the game, my revenue line was $28 million, and to get to $28 million, that implies a turnover revenue line of 14 billion per annum.
Wow.
It's crazy world, So that's why I burned out, by the way. I just couldn't keep it up.
Yeah, I'm really I love the sentiment of belief, because I know when I get you have bad days and challenging days at times, but it's that resilience to get you back up, to have that belief. And like being in sales, like you've been in sales, stock exchange is sales, ironically enough, and it is, because all you're doing, you're buying and selling stocks and shares. And I lived and worked in the Square Mile, the financial district in London. So not the area that you were in, but I know a lot of my friends were in the same area. So it is very high game, and you have to believe in yourself. And yeah, I think that's one of the...
But it's an interesting point. It is selling for sure, and I alluded earlier on. Growing up in a pub as a kid at 10 years old, I was selling raffle tickets, and people used to say to me, "Oh, Chris, you can sell snow to the Eskimos and sand to the Arabs," and I believed it. Trust me, I didn't doubt myself. But in the city, the selling is different, because it basically is making a deal happen. So I'm not the owner of the product that I'm trying to sell to you. I'm an intermediary between a buyer and a seller. So I'm working both sides of the trade. I know both the buyer and the seller. I have both their interests in mind. It's not always I know both sides, because I sell to a market maker who sells on to somebody else. But often in the beginning, certainly when I started out, I was talking to both the buyer and the seller, and it's hard to believe it's right to buy and to sell. Of course, that's a ludicrous suggestion, but the point is, you need to know that people believe in what they're doing and why they're doing it. Now, nobody's got a God-given right to be right all the time. But we did try to be impactful in the thinking. I think you should do this because, I think you should not do that because, and so on and so on. So it is a high-end selling game, that's for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it is, and I've seen people at that game at the very top level, because it is one of the very tops, but it's also very stressful as well. So describe to me what you do right now. I know you got this wonderful book, so maybe you can actually speak about the book and where can people find it.
Well, thank you, appreciate that. The website is $1 Million Irishman. not the Million Dollar Irishman, which has got a really good 4-minute audio clip on it, which is, the audiobook is read by an OMA RFC actor. It gives you a good flavor of the story. Originally, the book, and there's also there lots of press comments, including video clips of television and radio that I've done. But there's also, I suppose the key thing is really the journey in life, as I call it, from John Street to Wall Street. So John Street is where I was born, above a pub, literally, to working at Merrill Lynch and spend a good bit of time on Wall Street as the London guy in New York, but not working there, but visiting. So I suppose what I do today and what in relation to the book. Next thing I'm aiming for is a movie deal. So I'm in discussions with a Belfast TV production group who work for Netflix, amongst others. So I'm going over there, and then we'll be seeking some funding. And my day job is in what's called build to rent. So it's high-end funding again and financing again. And again, it's about two parties in a relationship, because these deals take months to put together. And so I'm mandated by a couple of very large housing associations. And I find development guys who own sites and can do the construction, and then my guy buys it all on a turnkey basis, usually in hundreds of apartments at a time. Ones that I'm looking at the moment include one of 336 apartments and another at 800 apartments. So that's it.
Wow. Chris, it's been absolutely phenomenal, and I really appreciate your time. I know time is precious for all of us, but thank you so much for coming on board. I'm sure we're going to chat again in a separate podcast, because I want to deep dive a little bit more. But thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure, Jason. Thank you so much.
One that the most I know it's gone a little bit further on than that now. If I'm your boss, then layer on that's very clear.
CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, Nobel laureates. So really has expanded.
What really makes a resilient person, because I coach people and all that.